Right, here we go. We are starting here today with another fun-filled, action-packed, non-flipped Algebra 2 classroom video with me, Coach Goo. Unit 14, notes number 3. Today we're going to be finding the attributes of rational functions. So last week, guys, we gave you all the attributes, right? All you had to do is graph. So this week, we're going to actually find out how to find the different attributes and then graph after finding the attributes ourselves. So remember, we don't graph from transformations, we graph based on attributes. So, do you guys remember any of those attributes that we graph by? There's 4 of them. Spit them out. What are they? Okay, that's right. So, vertical and? Right, so we're just going to label that as 1. So, asymptotes. That's horizontal and vertical. Hang on. I can't write that fast. Vertical. And then you said holes, that's right. Y-intercepts, and one more? That's right. Wow, Oliver just knocked them all out. That's right. X-intercepts, Y-intercepts, asymptotes, and the holes. Those are the 4 attributes that we graph by. So we're going to actually find out today how you find all of this information. So we're going to start with X-intercepts, also called the roots, the zeros, and we're going to find out the Y-intercepts. So remember, x-intercepts always have a y value of, do you know? 0, right, because x-intercept, it crosses the x-axis. The y value is always 0 on the x-axis. All right, so that means if the y value is 0, f of x equals 0, right? And since we're dealing with fractions, because these are rational functions, there's only one way to make this fraction equal 0. Take a look at this. Not this. So we want f of x to equal 0, right? Well, let's say we have a fraction then. And let's say it's like a times b and then like c times d. What would a or b have to be for this whole thing to equal 0? 0, that's right. A or b, so the factor on top, one of these factors, does it matter which one? No, it doesn't matter. But one of those factors has to be 0. Because if either of these are 0, 0 times anything is 0. And then 0 divided by anything is 0, and then we have what we want. So, to find the x-intercepts, we're going to set the numerator factors equal to 0 to solve that. Now, the y-intercepts are very simple because the y-intercept always has an x value of 0. That's right. And so if the x value is 0, you just plug in 0 for x, solve it, and then that gives you the y-intercept. All right, so let's look at some examples. Maybe the tough part here will be factoring because you actually do have to factor. Look at number 1. X squared minus 5x plus 6 over x minus 6. You have to factor the top and the bottom before you can do this. So what method would I use to factor at the top? I would use the x box method, or if you can just, figure it out, you can do that too. And if I did that, it would be x minus 2 times x minus 3 over x minus 6. You should use the Xbox method. I'm not showing it to you because we've done that a million times, so you can do that on your own. But the results would be x minus 2 times x minus 3. Okay, so after that, now I want to find the zeros, the x-intercepts. So what do I do to find the x-intercepts? So give me an example. What's one of the equations? X minus 2 equals 0. That's right. And then how do I solve? Add 2. So x equals 2. So what is one of my zeros then? 2? You just write 2? Parentheses. 2. Comma 0. Thank you. That's right. Jaime out with the save. All right. So how do I find my other 0? X minus 3 equals 0. And then I'm just going to add 3 to both sides. And what is my second 0 then? Parentheses 3, 0. That's right. So those are the 2 x-intercepts, or we call them zeros. 2 comma 0, 3 comma 0. Remember, they are points. You have to write them like they're points, all right? So now I have to find the y-intercept, which is a little easier. How do I find the y-intercept? You put the zeros in for what? For the x's, right? You can put 0 in for all the x's. So you can choose either one, because in this case, they're both the same, right? So I like to do the left side. So I plug in 0 for all the x's, I get 0 squared minus 5 times 0 plus 6 over 0 minus 6. What does that simplify out to? 6 over negative 6, which reduces to negative 1. So what is the y-intercept? Right, parentheses 0 comma negative 1. Y-intercept, it's a point. You have to write it with an x-coordinate and a y-coordinate. And that's how you find the zeros and the y-intercepts. So let's do a couple more examples. So on number 2, we got to factor at the top here. Do you guys know how to factor the top right here? Because it is a difference of squares. That's right, x minus 8, x plus 8. That's right. Because you see perfect squares, x squared. You see 64. You see the minus sign. That's a difference of squares. And the shortcut is the square root minus the square root of the second one, and the square root plus the square root of the second one. There it is. Over x plus 2. So how would I find my two zeros? Which ones? Right, and? That's right. So what are my two zeros then? That's right. So what do I write though? 8, 0, and? That's right. Okay, good. Now how am I going to find my y-intercept? Plug in 0 for, you can plug in either one. There's nothing canceled out here, so you can choose either one. So if you want to do the left, you can do left. If you want to do the right, you can use the right. If I plug it into the original though, it's going to be 0 squared minus 64 over 0 plus 2. What does that simplify to? Right, negative 64 over 2, which then all over it reduces to? Negative 32. Very good. So what is the y-intercept? 0, negative 32. Nice. It might be one, I think one more after this, but it might be a repeat of this. Number 3. Okay, we have to practice factoring out when we see something like this, because a lot of people get tripped up by the things where it's like x squared minus 8x. What is the first step of factoring, actually? What do you have to do before you can start just factoring? Before that, even. The greatest common factor, right. So look at this, x squared minus 8x. Is there a greatest common factor there? What is it? Right, we factor out the x, and then what's left?
8. No. Yeah.
Not just 8. X? Minus 8, there we go. And look, after you took out the greatest common factor, the x, it's already factored out. There's your two factors right there. You have the x, and you have the x minus 8. All right, that's two factors. Over x plus 3. Right, you kind of keep it together. Technically, it's like this, like parentheses x plus 3. All right, so what am I going to do to find my zeros? What should I set? What should my equations be? X minus 8 equals 0 and? X equals 0, right. So this x equals 0, that's a freebie. Look, it's already solved, right? And then this x minus 8, that one we actually have to solve for x a little bit. Right. So what are my actual? 8, 0? That's right. Nice. Okay, now what about the y-intercept? Plug in 0, so if I'll get 0 squared minus 8 times 0 over 0 plus 3, which simplifies to? What's on the top? 0. What's on the bottom? And 0 divided by 3 is? 0. So what is the y-intercept? 0, 0. Right. Also notice, look, if 0, 0 is an x-intercept, it has to be a y-intercept because this 0, 0 is on the origin, right? That crosses the x and the y. So if you see 0, 0 as one of the intercepts, it's going to be the other one as well. It has, I mean, it should be, you know, because it's right on the origin, right on the crosshairs, which is intersecting both. I have yet to see a case where it doesn't, but you know, don't want to say absolute. Don't want to be wrong here. But anyways, number 4. How would I factor out the top? What method would I use? The X box, right? This one you have to use X box because you have to see the A and the B and the C. But yeah, you would check for the GCF first, but there's not one. All right, so if I use the X box, it's going to be X minus 10 times X plus 2 over X minus 4. And so now, how am I going to find my zeros? So what am I going to write?
X minus 10 equals 0.
Right, and?
X plus 2 equals 0.
Whoa, look at that. So what are my actual zeros going to be?
10, 0, and
Yeah, negative 2, 0.
Right, 10, 0, and negative 2, 0. Very good. Okay, and then how do I find my y-intercept? Plug in 0 for the x's. So we're going to have 0 squared minus 8 times 0 minus 20 over 0 minus 4. So that simplifies to what? Negative 20 over negative 4, which reduces to
5.
5. So my y-intercept is going to be 0, 5. That is finding the zeros and finding the y-intercept. So once you've written that down, turn to the back page. All right. So on the back side, we're going to be looking at how to find the vertical asymptotes, which we actually already talked about last Friday, the holes, and the domain. The domain is pretty simple. Vertical asymptotes, remember, vertical asymptote is when there's an error. It's undefined, really. So that's when the denominator equals 0. So for the denominator to equal 0, that means, let's take a look at this again. How can I make the denominator equal 0? What would have to equal 0?
0.
Which one?
C or D.
C or D, right? Doesn't matter which one, right? So one of the factors of the bottom has to equal 0. So this time, instead of setting the numerator to 0, we're going to set the denominators to 0 to find the vertical asymptotes. And remember, holes only occur when, do you remember? How do you know if there's a hole or not? Yeah, it tells you on the paper. Yeah. That's one. Yeah, when the factors cancel out. Remember when you have a factor on the top and you have a factor on the bottom, you cross it out, that's when there's a hole. Yeah. Just curious if anybody actually remembered off the top of their head. All right, so let's take a look at some of these problems then. Number 5. This one's already factored out for you. F of x equals x over x plus 7. Please tell me I'm recording. Thank God. All right. So to find the vertical asymptote, what equation would I use here? Snatched. X plus 7 equals 0. That's right. Remember you set the denominator equal to 0. So subtract 7 to solve for x, and your vertical asymptote is x equals negative 7. Remember, the vertical asymptote is a line. X equals negative 7 tells you the equation of that line. And that's it for the vertical asymptote. Now, are there any holes on this equation?
No.
Why not?
Because you don't cancel out.
Right, there's nothing to cancel out. So there's no holes because, stop moving around, please. Nothing to cancel out. And then lastly, what would the domain be then? X is not equal to negative 7. Very good, Alejandro. There it is. That's right. X is not equal to negative 7. Remember, vertical asymptote is that one line you can't touch. So that's the only value that's not going to be included in the domain. Let's go to number 6 then. Is number 6 completely factored out? No, why not? Greatest common factor where? Is 8, right. And what would be left? That's correct. Now what can I do with this? Right, we can cancel them out. That's going to be a hole. That's right. When I cancel this out, notice, look, the only thing that's going to be left is 1 over 8. So once I've canceled it out, it's just a straight line. F of x equals 1 over 8 is a horizontal line through 1 over 8. Okay, so now what are my vertical asymptotes going to be? How do you find a vertical asymptote? You set the denominator equal to 0. What's in the denominator? 8. So does 8 equal 0? No. So that means there's no vertical asymptotes. Like that. Okay, so then, now as for the holes, remember a hole has a coordinate. It has an x and a y value, right? So can you tell me what the x value is? Do you know what it is? Not quite. It's 5, that's right. How do you get that?
Because you just
Right. the canceled out factor, the x minus 5, we set that equal to 0. And when we solve for x, that will tell us the x value of the whole. See, the x value is 5 now, right? But now I need the y value. How do you find the y value after you know the x value?
You put x for the equation.
Yeah, you put the x into the equation, but what is my equation?
X minus 5.
No, that's not my equation.
Over x minus 5 over
That's not my equation. What's my final equation here?
x minus 4.
Nope.
X equals 5.
Nope.
A does not equal 0.
No, the final equation here is
1 over 8.
it's 1 over 8, right? It's just 1 over 8. You simplify, you reduce, you end up with 1 over 8. So is there anywhere to put the 5 into? So that just means it's 1 over 8. It doesn't even matter what the x is, it's always 1 over 8. If you had an x, you would plug it in, right, and solve. But since there's no x, it's just 1 over 8. So the whole is going to be at 5, 1, 8. So then, what is my domain on this problem? X does not equal 5. That is right, because it cannot equal this x value where the whole is, which is 5. Nice. All right, let's go to the next one then. Right here, 7. Okay, this is definitely not factored out. How would I factor the numerator out?
Take the x out.
Factor out x, what's left?
X minus 4.
X minus 4. The bottom, you'd have to use the x box, and that would give you x minus 7 times x minus 3. Okay, so how am I going to find the vertical asymptotes?
Don't you do x minus 4 equals 2?
That's for finding the x-intercepts.
X minus 7 equals 0.
X minus 7 equals 0. Remember, vertical asymptote is set the denominator equals 0. And what else? Right, so what are my two vertical asymptotes then?
7. X equals 7.
Right, and make sure you say it like that. That's right, x equals 7 and
X equals 3.
x equals 3. That's right. Are there any holes on this function? No, why not?
There's no cross out.
Nothing cancels out, that's right. And then what is my domain?
X does not equal 7. X does not equal.
That's right, x does not equal 7 and x does not equal 3. That is it. Let's go to the last one then. Number 8. Let's factor it out. How do I factor the top out? 5, right. You can factor out a 5. What's left?
X minus 6
Plus 6, right. Plus 6. Over, and if we do the x box on the bottom, we're going to get x plus 6 times x minus 4. Cancel out what? Right? And what am I left with? That's correct. Good. Okay, so then what am I going to do to find my vertical asymptotes? X minus 4 equals 0. It's racing over there. All right, so then what is my vertical asymptote? X equals 4. Very good. So that's the vertical asymptote. Now, what about the whole? Right, the x value is going to be negative 6 because I take the canceled out factor x plus 6, set it equal to 0, and solve for x. So on the whole, okay, please. Ah! Okay, so we're going to have negative 6 as the x value. Now what do I do with that x value to find the y value?
Put it in for x.
Where?
With 5 over x minus 4.
Right, so what is my equation going to say? It's going to say 5 over,
4 minus 4.
what?
Negative 10.
Negative 6, right, negative 6 minus 4, which is negative 10. So we have,
Negative 1.
right, 5 over negative 10, which is, you said,
Negative 1 over 2.
negative 1 over 2. So the y value after I put in that x equals negative 6 is going to be negative 1 over 2. So that's the y value at of my whole. And so then with all this information, what is the domain? And? That is correct. X is not equal to 4 and x is not equal to negative 6. So the point of this all is that now that you'll be able to find your own information, and then you need to be able to graph after you find your own information. All right. So that's going to end these notes, guys. We got one more, but until next time, we'll see you then. Peace.